some ground rules. If you would like to speak on an issue, please go up to the microphone and identify yourself. If someone else is talking, please allow them their comments. Do not make side comments. Do not make any snickers. Do not be rude. In other words, be polite. Allow them to finish their comments. If you don't agree with them, please, when they have finished speaking, it will be your turn to go to the microphone and state your views as well. Please, if you have cell phones, you might want to turn them off or put them on vibrate. Start that. We are going to, we were going to limit this till 12 o'clock, but I'm thinking that we may be able to leave here a little sooner, perhaps. So we're going to start with planning decisions and having them give us information. So go ahead, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. Again, my name is Chuck Lawton. I'm Chief Economist with Planning Decisions. We're the company that responded to the request for proposals that the town published last spring to look at the alternative costs of the decision before you to stay in the RSU or to withdraw, and we've prepared a report on that. I wanted to try to take this time really not to do another instructional explanation of the report, but to try to think what I could do or we could do from the work that we've done to serve you. Again, the purpose of our work is not to say, this is the answer, this is what you should do. That's your decision as citizens, all of the town of Arundel. My view of my purpose was to help lay out the conditions surrounding your decision and formulate the way to think about it. I'm not saying this is the conclusion you should come to, but this is, if I was in your shoes, what I think I would want to think about before I made that decision. And I hope people can see this, but what in reflecting on the previous meetings I've been to, my own report, the comments that people have made, it seems to me that the situation that the citizens of Arundel face are a choice: stay in the RSU or withdraw from the RSU. And in making that choice, there are certain criteria that, how does it stack up against these criteria, which I think are the important ones for people to think about. What's the educational implications? What's the environment? What's going to happen to the learning experiences of our kids in this community under A or B? Second, and this also reflects a lot of what I've heard in the meetings, what's control? I've heard a lot about local control, a lot about people imposing things on us from outside, a lot about I want to be involved in my children's education, I want to be in some position to influence what goes on. So how does control come down on the stay or withdraw? Third, what's the cost? How much is it going to cost us, and what are the conditions that affect the cost under a stay and withdraw? And then finally, what are the prospects for the future? We're not making a decision. You are not making a decision based on today only or next year's kids only. But what's your vision for what you want for the children of Arundel in the future based on this decision? Because it's not going to stay the same. Birth rates are going to change. Migration is going to change. Property tax values are going to change. education technology is going to change. The question is, from that perspective, based on all these things here, what do I want for the future? What do I want for where I live, what my children go through? I've heard a lot of talk in the previous meetings about my child in the middle school or the high school is getting treated the same or different than my child in the elementary school. What's going to happen in the future? So, my sense of what would be useful would be to talk about those things rather than try to go through some sort of lecture about the report. Does that seem reasonable to anybody? Does anybody have any comments on that? Does anybody want to add anything? It seems to me that's, again, a lot of people would try to say, well, Chuck, what do you decide? It doesn't make any difference what I think, because there are a lot of people who are already decided. I rode through a forest of signs on my way up here. That's really not what's important. One, because it's not my decision, it's yours. And two, because it's easy to blame somebody else. Because, oh, he said to do it. And I'm not serving you at any purpose to say, I think you should vote, withdraw, or stay, because that's substituting my judgment for yours, and that's not the purpose of this process. So, it's not so much that I'm here to say yes or no, I agree or I disagree, or even that I think one is the right one or the wrong one. What I think my purpose here is to try to help formulate a decision. And I know a lot of people, they don't care about that. They've already made their decision. Some may have already voted. But nonetheless, for those that want to hear about it, it seems to me these are the things to think about. So, are there any things that we know regarding education quality under the stay and withdraw? Seems to me that the fundamental fact with regard to the education criterion is, are we part of, do we benefit or suffer from being included in a larger group, in a RSU? In fact, the children of Arundel are treated as part of the children of Kennebunk and Kennebunkport and Arundel as an RSU versus alone. The primary impacts of that are with regard to, it's somewhat carrying over, but parental involvement. I've heard people say, they don't let me decide what to do, it's the RSU's imposing on us from the outside, versus there are programs that are available, there are choices that would be available if we stay in the RSU that would not be available. That if we withdraw, it's the people, children who are educated in this school, in this building, it's the quality of the teachers, the quality of the principal, the involvement of the parents. The learning experience is going to be what we, the citizens of Arundel, put into the teachers and the administration, the technology. Here in this building, for middle school and high school, it'll be Thornton Academy, and basically we're in a contractual relationship. We're going to hire it out, send our kids to the middle school, send our kids to the high school, or to the Kennebunk High School based on the cost of the tuition, versus staying within where there are, again, not pro or con, but benefits from resources, part of the RSU, that are available for the educational learning experience. In fact, after one of the meetings, I talked to Jamie Jensen, who's the technology director at for the RSU. I was saying to him, well, how would you handle it? We're talking about if this is a standalone school right here, how much of your time do you spend And if it was a withdrawal decision, what would it take to provide those services, but only for the children and teachers in this school? And he says, well, geez, I don't know. Sometimes I'm down here 2-3 times a week. Sometimes I'm not here for 2 weeks. I'm here in helping teachers get set up and learn how to use the technology to support their lesson plans, their educational experiences. Big burst at the beginning of the year, less so throughout. It's not easy. It's not something you can just slice up like a chair. We've got 10 kids, we need 10 chairs, and that's what we'll have. So there's that question, and the ultimate decision is, it's a risk. Do you want to say, I'm willing to take the share of whatever shared resources there are for the educational quality to stay? Or do I want to say, no, we're going to focus here. We're going to have a vision for this school, for these children. We're going to have the best possible teachers, the best possible principal, and focus on this school, Mildred L. Day, the elementary K through 5 students here, give them a quality education, and then contract out and not worry about whatever resources might be shared in a larger system. That's the whole point of withdrawing. As you're getting out of a system, you're relying on yourself. So, again, those are the findings. Again, it wasn't my charge to talk about educational quality, but it was certainly the emotional impact of much that I heard over the other meetings, and it's a condition of this decision. Second criteria, control. Clearly, here, the stay, just like you're dispersing the educational resources and gathering from a larger, here you're dispersing control. You're part of an RSU, you elect a person to go to a board, that person is one voice among others of Kennebunk and Kennebunkport, and so it's dispersed. Now, if you withdraw, yes, you've got your own community, you elect your own board, you have the people who are involved, your own PTA, your own school board, your own superintendent. You've got the control, again, if you exercise it. My own sense is that involvement is largely a question of making your voice heard. You want to have some control, speak up, say what you want, and listen. There are two sides to that. You've got to be forceful in saying what you want to do and not just sit back silently and say, well, nobody asked me. And you have to listen to what somebody else has to say. So that the control is a question of how much effort, how much forcefulness, how strong an opinion do people have to say, I don't care whether they like it or not. I'm going to have my say. I'm going to go up and sit down in the superintendent's office. I'm going to have him say, this is what I, in Arundel, want you to pay attention to. Or is it they just never pay attention? They're not attentive to us. I can never get out there and impose, even if they say they'll listen to me. They wait until I'm out of the office and they go to do the same thing they were going to do anyway, and I just want to have it here. I can control it. I can have my voice heard, and I'll go talk to Joe or Sally, who's on the school board, and I'll get my voice heard locally, and that's really important. So, to me, it's a question of how forceful do you want to be, how dispersed, how confident are you of your Arundels, or lack of confidence, how unconfident are you that the citizens of Arundel can make their voice heard within the 3 community RSU versus, no, I don't have any trust in that. I just want to have my voice against my neighbors in my town, and we decide. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's simply that's a criterion that people need to think about in making their decision. Next one is cost. What's it going to cost us to stay or withdraw? Well, there are a couple of things that we know for certain, and a couple of things that are negotiable, a little fuzzy. The first thing we know for certain is that in a withdrawal, the state is going to give less money to help pay for the Arundel Alone system. It's the rules of the operation that the EPS, the Essential Programs and Services calculations, done on these children in this building with this set of characteristics, how many are special needs, how many are education as a second language, how many are gifted and talented, run through the little black box in Augusta, and it's less money that the state will allocate because the calculations made for middle school and high school, which are not located here, are done through a state average that's lower than the same calculations run through a high school and a middle school in RSU 21, the Kenny Bunkport. So again, that's simply a fact of the rules of the road. The second known cost is capital improvements. If Arundel chooses to stay within, it subjects itself, you subject yourself, to capital expansion decisions for the whole RSU rather than purely for the community. That's a known. It's not known because who knows what the citizens of all three towns will vote for a new high school, a renovated middle school, and a renovated Mildred Day. But if, in fact, all are approved, at whatever cost, and there's a lot of disputes about, is it 40 million, 50 million, whatever it might be, it doesn't make any difference in the end. When the amount comes due, if there's a new high school, a new middle school, and I won't say new, but a renovated elementary school here, whatever those capital costs are, it's going to cost Arundel more if it has to pay a share of a high school and a middle school, as opposed to a decision to withdraw, in which case we have only to pay for whatever we decide to do with this school here. So again, if you presume the choice is pay for a share of 3 capital improvements, a high school, a middle school, and an elementary school here, or pay and pay that on a percentage basis. And there are, again, options to do it 60% students, 60% property, 40% students, 80-20, 100 0. All of that simply increases the range of possibilities, but the ultimate outcome is no matter what those choices are, if all 3 are approved, it's going to cost more because Arundel will have some responsibility for 3 capital improvements versus a responsibility for the capital improvements here alone. Again, the outcomes are known, I mean, the costs of specified outcomes are known. What the outcomes are, up to the ballot box. Who knows? You may not decide to have a capital improvement here. It could be very inexpensive if you say, if everything's approved here and we don't do anything in this school, it'd be a lot cheaper. So there's a question of certain known facts and certain uncertain outcomes. So that's the cost criteria. Then on the less clearly well known are the administrative costs, the transportation costs, and the special education costs of staying or withdrawing. If the decision is made to stay, what is known is that special education services available through the RSU would not be available, or would be available only at a contracted cost, just like the middle school or high school, if you withdraw. That's largely a question of risk tolerance. If I'm saying, I think we can provide enough quality special education because we, Rundle, would, on withdrawal, still have to have a superintendent, still have to have a curriculum director, still have to have a transportation director, still have to have a special education coordinator, and if that person is creative, intelligent, compassionate enough to provide the services here in this school for these students and arrange for the middle school and high school students to get special education services either by contracting with private or providing them here, then it could be less costly. On the other hand, if there is a student with a particular severe special need, then the risk that that could not be provided, that student's needs could not be cared for within anything that could reasonably be paid for. Now, I mean, you can raise as much money as you want to have a whole special education program run right here and try to do it as a local service, but that would be vastly more expensive because the number of students served is largely an actuarial question. What just genetically proceeds through and comes in and up, and that tends to be very spiky year to year, class to class, and frankly, even the same person year to year based on progress made under lesson and treatment programs that we provide. So the point there is that there is a spreading of cost risks with special education under the stay scenario that does not exist under the withdraw scenario for the same dollar cost. And therefore, that's a consideration that's not clear. There's no requirement. There certainly could be a choice of this is what we're going to spend for special education, and it's less than what's in effect our share of the RSU cost, and therefore it's a lower cost here. But that decision simply has a risk that the following year it may be way up. That's a risk tolerance question. Then the third element of uncertainty in the cost criterion are administrative cost and efficiency. How much does Arundel think it can hire a superintendent, transportation director, a curriculum director, a special education director, a business manager, and serve those purposes alone versus pay for its share of those services spread over the 3 community RSU. Would it be possible to have that be less? Yes. That looking back to 2009, the last year in which Arundel was alone, the state calculation, what the state would reimburse on transportation was in the order of $200,000. Arundel's share in the RSU is in the order of $500,000. Could we run our transportation system in Arundel, get our students here, get our students to the middle school, get our students to the high school for less than $500,000? Perhaps. That's an administrative technical challenge. Could Arundel alone hire a superintendent, hire the necessary administrators, hire or contract with technical experts to provide the support for teachers that now come through a system-wide service and do it on our own locally? Is it possible? Yes. Is that acceptable? Is that efficient? That would be a decision to be made by a local school board in how it can run its system. To try to summarize, there are several known costs and several to-be managed costs. The known costs, potentially higher capital expenditures and definitely lower state subsidies, are with the withdrawal. On the unknown, uncertain, to be managed, on the withdrawal side are the size and risk of special education and the efficiency of administrative management, running the operation, transporting students. So again, those are decisions. Think about, and what confidence do you have that that can be accomplished before you say it's better or worse to withdraw or stay on the cost side. And finally, and this is where I think probably the most important criterion is, what's our vision for the future? What is it that we as a community want to accomplish? Because no matter what conclusion you come to on the first three, that's going to be different next year and the year after that and the year after that. Now, based on the enrollment projections that we did as part of this, the elementary K through 5 enrollment numbers for Arundel are likely, given past trends, to be fairly stable. It's somewhere between 240 and 260 students in the Mildred Day School are likely to be here. That while birth rates declined from the 90s to the early 2000s, they've tended to stabilize, and enrollment in kindergarten has, in recent years, tended to be slightly more than the number of people born 5 years previously, aging forward and simply coming into school, which indicates that there's been some migration, some increase in numbers of students entering in. The middle school and high school are going to see enrollment declines over the next several years, largely because of the simple demographic working through of the drop in birth rates. As that lower numbered cohort gets to middle school, there are going to be several fewer middle school students. As they get to high school, there will be several fewer high school students, so that enrollment is likely to decline in the high school and the middle school and high school over the next 4 or 5 years before stabilizing. And in that regard, Arundel is different than its communities of Kennebunk and Kennebunkport, where the birth numbers and the enrollment decline is more precipitous, particularly in Kennebunkport. So that the future there is of greater declines in enrollment. And then the other side of that, what's the number of births and then sort of just natural aging through the school system, is the broader economy. What's going to happen? Is the job environment going to recover? Are there going to be more people looking to locate, to build a home in Arundel versus Kennebunkport? and what's the likely future for how many kids there are going to be to educate here, and in that, what do the citizens of Arundel want their town to be? How attractive is this town going to be in an environment of job growth and economic recovery and people looking for a good place to live and a good place to educate their children? Is the vision that Arundel has for itself within the RSU or withdrawing better served by focusing on a good elementary school here and saying we're going to contract out tuition our middle school and high school students, or to say we're part of a larger community and our future in terms of growth of property tax base, growth of numbers of households is such that we'll compete, we'll draw, we'll get increased property value through new houses, new industries, new businesses, in such ways to maintain our tax base here in the future. That's the most sort of emotionally based picture of what is it that I want for my community in the future that will affect the cost. Because whatever the cost may be today, the ultimate determinants of cost in the future are going to be what happens to the tax base here, and how does that compare to the tax base in the other communities if we stay, and the whole state if we withdraw. Because the other known future condition is that property values statewide have been recently and are likely to continue to grow more slowly in the rest of the state than they do in southern Maine in this area, which means that state aid to education, whichever system you have, to the RSU or to Arundel alone, is likely to be less in the future than it has been, simply because that's the way it's distributed. Property value per student, the higher it is, the less state aid you get, and while yours may not be growing greatly, if the state is even growing less, then that's going to be that much less available either to the RSU or to the Arundel alone. So that's a consideration in terms of what is it that our educational system will do to help make our town attractive for property value, increased business, increased home construction that will provide us the tax base to support either one of those levels of education. So that's simply my take on analyzing the information available to you, and I'd love to have a discussion or to have the selectmen talk about it, but my, again, summary is that's the way that I would think about the decision before you. I'd look at those criteria, I'd look at what I want to achieve, and then I'd say, stack them up. Which ones get a score? Total up your totals and come to a conclusion. Not, here's the right answer. So, with that, I guess turn it over to you, Roman. I'd be happy to answer questions or listen to comments.
I do have one question. You said that K through 5 enrollment for future is staying stable. Well, if that enrollment is staying stable, why is 6 through 12 decreasing?
Because the decline in the elementary population was more a question of the late 90s, early 2000s. And as that group works its way through the enrollment in the middle and high school will continue to decline until the stable elementary works its way up.
So it may be declining at at some point, but then based on our historical data, it will go back up.
Yes.
Question?
Hi, I'm John Rennell. Mr. Lawton, the last time you met with us, we talked about, like in option A, under local extra debt service. I had a question about, in the withdrawal agreement, it calls for a $131,000 payoff of the bond that was voted on a year ago for the middle school and high school repairs. And you had said that that $131,000 was basically included in that $372. I think you agreed to that. It's in table 11, cost of budget alternatives, and actually in the debt, in the estimated future debt, it's also in that table. And I had asked you if that, because in your Arundel alone, in table 9, in fiscal year 13 and 14, you have a payment there. One year is 16,429, the next year is 15,643.
Yes.
But if we withdraw, that's going to be paid off.
Yes.
Right? We didn't.
Right, and in order to keep the comparison the same, what I did in there was to keep that decline 16, 15, 14 payment in there with the assumption that the money that would come from the extra budget savings, the fund balance, the RSU, would remain as a fund balance for the Arundel loan system. If, in fact, you did as you're suggesting, take that amount and simply pay off that debt, then yes, the 16, 15, 14 would disappear, but then there would be no fund balance unless Arundel loan built its fund balance.
Right. Well, in the withdrawal agreement, which is what we're voting on, it calls for a payoff of $131,000 being used from undesignated funds that are in the RSU account that belong to Arundel. Now, that 131 is going to get paid off, and anything greater than that will also come back to Arundel. So those numbers are going to be zero the first 2 years, and the total at the bottom would be $131,000 less. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And the same would hold true for option A, actually A, B, and C. Anything that Arundel alone is, the way the agreement is set up is that 131 is going to be paid off. Yes. So that would also, so that number is going to be total local extra on like table 11 is going to be 131,000 less at the bottom.
Yes.
So which makes that a little more actually cost effective to Arundel, or if you use that number, that 131,000 could be put into the budget somewhere else if necessary. The other thing that is pretty concerning is if you look at, within the RSU, the $715,000 payment was just in the paper the other day. The consolidated plan is not $4.2 million anymore; it's $9.8 million. So that's a wild card number right there, and the estimated for the new high school is also the prices have been jacked up considerably. So that lends even a higher risk to the long-term capital improvement numbers. I guess the other thing that's just recently happened is Kennebunkport has passed a petition around in their community, and I understand they have enough signatures, and they're kind of waiting. I'm not sure if they're basically holding the district hostage, and that's kind of a scary thing too, which is another reason why I'm going to vote yes. I do want to clarify an earlier question that came up at another meeting. What did we save or lose by voting down the last cost-sharing agreement? By voting down the last cost-sharing agreement, it cost us $1.47 per 100,000 valuation. And it was voted down for a number of reasons. Some people in the other communities voted it down because it protected the local schools and people want to be able to close the school in the district. because that's where the real cost savings of staying in the RSU is going to come from. But it didn't go far enough. A lot of people around the field went far enough to protect us. The new cost sharing program that's being offered now, if we vote to stay in the RSU, we definitely need to pass that cost sharing, because that one goes much further to protect the people of Arundel. What ended up, and then there was the TAMS buyout, and there was the debate of how much money we were going to save. And the estimates based on the kids that had showed interest in going there, we were looking at a possible 7 years to recoup the 1.2 million. There was only 5 years left in the contract. That was a consideration. But what happened was the tax rate went to $59.87 per 100,000, and that came down from 89 to 76. So we saved $29.89 per 100,000 by not buying out the TAMS contract. I just wanted to touch on that, just to, and with the $1.47 on the cost sharing, came out to a net savings of $28.42 per 100,000 valuation. And if you put that to the whole town's evaluation, you can get a total amount of what we saved. A couple other points I just wanted to make. The RTI program that everybody's touting, that the RSU has created, was actually created by Special Ed Director Jen Hall prior to consolidation, because that's when the federal mandate came down that an RTI program had to be created. The parking lot out front was revamped and built when the superintendent was Dick Marks. Dick Marks has been a superintendent here for over 10 years. And Mr. Dubois' baskets, I believe, were purchased by the rec department. No?
Half rec, half.
Half rec, half school. Okay. Thank you.
My name is Don Shea. I'm the town manager. I'm not a resident, but I just need to speak something into the record that came to my attention the other day, and in the interest of fairness, I want to make sure that this information gets out there. I did not have time to mail it. I'm going to read an email that I sent to all the boards and committees, as well as the corrected information that I have provided. I asked that the residents at least take this information into consideration as they're making their decision. The email was sent yesterday, and it states, the recent mailing that Arundel residents received was brought to my attention by a resident who received it. Town Hall did not receive this mailing. I was asked whether the numbers that were reflected in the mailing were accurate. They in fact are not. I'm not sure if I have time to produce a mailing, which I did not, to send this to all residents, but it has been sent to the Journal Tribune so that hopefully it can at least get to the media for coverage. I will be discussing these inaccuracies at the meeting tomorrow morning and posting the video of that meeting on the website as I did with the last one. This information will be placed on the homepage of the website for all residents who visit it to see, and that information is in fact there. There will also be handouts, which are over on the window by where the kitchen is, provided to any residents in attendance so that if they're going to make a decision based on a mailer that was sent by an anonymous group, they can at least have the accurate information. The corrections that are necessary are listed on the back page of the mailing under Town of Arundel Historical Data. The attached PDF file, which is available to all residents at the window over there and on the town's website. The attached PDF file is the actual Town of Arundel historical data. They are the budget numbers from fiscal year 2006 through 2009. I did not attempt to correct any of the other information represented in the mailing, just information that's stated as historical Arundel data. The numbers that you see attached have been verified by Lisa, the Deputy Treasurer, and I, and they come directly from our Trio software. I will discuss this matter further with the Board of Selectmen at the next scheduled meeting, unfortunately after the election. I'm not here to attempt to sway anyone's vote, but I am here to make sure that the information that is being taken as fact by residents is actually fact. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Please feel free to forward it to any and all residents and attempt to correct the misinformation that has been provided. And I'm going to read the PDF attachment that was attached to that email. It's to all Arundel residents from Todd Shea, Town Manager, regarding recent mailing on pink card stock regarding withdrawal, and this was dated yesterday. The memo is to inform all Arundel residents that recent mailing by an unidentified group of residents has incorrectly stated the historical budget figures in regards to RSU withdrawal. This is not a mailing that was initiated by the Town of Arundel, and the corrections that need to be made on the document are listed below. These corrections refer to the Town of Arundel historical data That list is provided on the back page of the pink mailing. Once again, this is not a mailing that was provided by the town offices. The numbers are on this sheet. I ask that you please pick one up or visit the website to view those numbers. And in summary, this is a very important decision that the residents of the town have to make on November 6th. I feel that the numbers need to be stated correctly if residents are going to make a decision on mailers that are being sent. The numbers you see above are accurate and should be used when considering whether or not to vote to withdraw. I thank all residents for their attention to this matter and ask that you all come out and vote on this important issue this coming Tuesday.
Thank you, Todd.
Sorry. My name is Diane Robbins. I also sit on the school board. And I'm going to try to address some of the things. And this is me as a taxpayer and someone who's lived in town for 30-some odd years. So I've seen a lot of changes in town. I wish the original meetings had been set up this way. Because when you have someone who's done financial figures put on the spot saying, what would you do? And he tells everyone that he would stay, and that lands in the paper, causes a lot of issues. Or at least it does for me, and I think it did for some other people. But I'm going to go through some of the criteria. But before I say so, I'm going to say a couple of things about how we got here. Okay? We got here because we were blackmailed, essentially, into joining an RSU. We were told that if we didn't join an RSU, we would lose all of our school funding. And many people who sit up at the front table are the same people who told us that if you didn't go, we'd lose our money. Then we have an issue with people who said that our school had issues that weren't taken care of. I think if you go look at the amount of money that was given to the RSU when we joined, because we had to hand over anything that was left over, there was well over $400,000 that was given to the RSU. That money would have been better spent on maintaining our school and taking care of the issues that people felt happened. But the reason the school didn't get taken care of wasn't because of the taxpayers. It was because of the people who were sitting on the school board, and their names are in your books, and the people that sit in front of you and the people that ran the town at the time. That money should have been spent. It was allocated to be used for the school, but it wasn't. So I want people to use caution when they say that the people didn't fund the school, because the people in this town did fund the school. The money wasn't used. And it wasn't just not used the last year. There was a carryover, I believe, for 3 years consecutively, and probably before that. When I look at education, I look at what we expect for our kids. And I'm getting a bird's eye view, because at 56 years old, I now have a second grader, first time in my life. So I'm getting a bird's eye view of the school. But I want to tell you, and I tell him this, and he can probably attest to it, is that I tell him that I don't care what he scores on his tests, as long as he did the best that he could do. And I think that sometimes we put way too much weight into a number from tests that are mandated from the federal government and the state, who are not really involved in our schools. But you can also have an RSU district who is a really good district. I'm not going to say anything bad about them, because there isn't anything bad about their school system. But I can tell you that they do have an issue with 2 of their schools. Is it because they're a bad RSU? No. Is it because they have bad teachers? No. It's because of the way the system is designed. In some respects, I sometimes feel that this testing system is designed to make you fail, not to help you pass. So if an RSU has 2 schools that aren't doing as well as they should be, according to whoever it is that designed these tests, that doesn't reflect on those teachers. those teachers are still teaching those kids, and they're still doing the best that they can. So when you're looking at your school, you look at what's between your walls, and you're looking at your teachers. We have the same teachers in the school now that we had when we left. Control? Well, I guess it depends on how you look at control. When you have a school board that has 6 members from Kennebunk, 3 members from Kennebunk, 3 members from Arundel, it's really hard to try to get anything that you want done for your own town. It's really kind of hard to control your taxes. Because even though for the last 3 years we voted down the school budget, it has still passed. And that should really make you guys wonder what's going to happen with school improvements. Because these other towns have the power to outvote us. Cost. No matter what you do, your school is always going to cost you more every single year. And why? Because you have to pay the teachers more, and because the state pays less. It's not going to matter whether you're in the RSU. It's not going to matter if you withdraw from the RSU. You're still going to have a higher cost each year. My biggest fear? Number one, they didn't send cost sharing to the voters before we voted on this in November. And why? Because now they don't have any reason to send it. Because we're going to continue to pay a higher piece. Kennebunk Port's not going to be happy with paying more, and Kennebunk's not going to be happy with paying more. So you tell me why anybody should consider anything within this study at anything less than a 60-40, which is what it is today, and I don't believe that it's going to change. I don't believe that the other towns will vote to change it. The cost of the new schools, in this current document, even though, as a town, we do not have a single student going to the middle school, other than students that are part of an arbitration, which means that we still have to pay Thornton part of their tuition, or for private paying students. Because we're withdrawing and because we were part of these RSU, we're still stuck with our piece of that tab. So should you find that you don't like how the RSU is going in 3 years from now, and they vote in all of the renovations at $50, $60, $70 million, whatever it happens to be at that time, when you withdraw, you will still be responsible for the rest of that bond for that amount of money. And so I want people to understand what it means. Not that I care how you vote, because everybody has the right to vote the way they want. I want people to understand what that means. If you vote no, and they vote in these improvements, we will, for the rest of that 20-year term, be responsible for paying for that bond. The cost is what you make of it as an RSU. The problem is that when you have one little tiny town with a lot of people that don't make a lot of money, up against 2 bigger towns, and to be quite honest, it is a conglomerate of votes. It is not, you don't have to have X from Arundel, X from Kennebunk, and X from Kennebunk Port. It's the majority, or in some cases a 2/3 majority, but it doesn't matter where the votes come from. So the town of Arundel can vote down every single school project and still have Kennebunk and Kennebunk Port vote them in. I'm not saying this because I want you to go one way or the other. I want you to understand that that's how the process works. What do I see for the future of this school? I see this school being the same school that it is today. I suspect that the teachers are still going to stay. And what we make of this school is what this town makes of it. And what we as parents who have kids in the school make of it. And how much involvement you have in your school. So financial figures are one piece of it. But what you want for the future is, do you want the debt? Do you want to carry the debt for schools that you have in the middle school for the next X number of years? You won't have any kids in that school. And then they can choose after that. Now, I've seen a lot of signs that have said you won't have a school choice. That's not true. Once the TA contract is done, you still have that choice. You'll have the choice of going to the middle school at Kennebunk, and you'll still have the choice of going to Thornton Academy. And your high school choice, despite what's been written in some documents, I was there when we drew up the withdrawal document. And that withdrawal document did not change school choice. What it did is the RSU wanted to ensure that we did not make them a non-choice. So they wanted it written in the document saying that that would be a choice until kids that are in kindergarten this year would graduate. So that's why it has, I believe, a 2023 date in it. It was not meant to say that you would not be able to send your kids to Biddeford, Thornton, Kennebunkport, Kennebunk. That's not what it was meant to do. It was meant to say that the school choice we have today stays, but that you would not lose your choice to go to Kennebunk. And I just wanted to make sure that these issues were clarified. The cost sharing that was sent to us 2 years ago only addressed new debt. It didn't address over EPS. And we have a big impact from things that are over EPS. We pay 14, almost 15% of everything that's over EPS in this town. So that's a big impact for us. So thank you for listening to me, and enjoy on Tuesday.
My name is Paul Raymond. On behalf of the group supporting withdrawal, I do have to apologize for the misleading numbers. It was not intended to mislead anybody. It was simply a subtraction error. So I do apologize for that. That being said, though, we also, being published by the town, should also have put in a change to the Lawton report showing the fact of how the effects of the increasing cost of renovations would affect our town. As we all saw in paper, Kennebunkport has just increased by double what their original renovation cost, which you had put in your original report. We have to consider that. That is a consideration, and that's where we lose our local control, because we'll have no control over how much they want to spend. We have a small voice in that, and we'll have no control of that. So that report should also reflect that. The other thing is that the report should have reflected a scenario which was also presented and has come to light recently, that Kennebunkport is in the process of attempting, they will submit a petition. They have enough signatures right now to withdraw. They're basically waiting for us to decide what we're going to do. And they're going to submit a petition to withdraw. They don't want to be stuck alone, or they don't want to be stuck with us if we're still in the RSU based on the current cost sharing formula. And so I believe that the report published by the town should also show those options, and should have those things. So once again, that's just something I think, and I do apologize for the numbers. They weren't intended to be misleading. They were just intended to show some factual data. It wasn't clerical error. Thank you.
I'm Melanie Mitchell, and my first and primary thought is Arundel agrees on the quality of education, but we do not agree on the mechanism that delivers the education. I received Todd's email yesterday because I am on the budget board, and last night I was thinking about all of this, and I think what I'm most disturbed about is Arundel didn't get what we were looking for. Not by fault of PDI, and I think it has to do with the RFP request. It wasn't PDI's charge to look into Arundel past budgets nor actual expenditures. When thinking about this last night, I found that there were two wild cards. Those would be state funding and special education. The loss of state funding doesn't compare to what is going on in the district now. So I sat down and I did some calculations comparing what I received in email yesterday from Todd. The 2009 expenditures, and I was looking at increases and decreases to the PDI report, and I used table 7 because there was a bigger breakdown. For the school administration line, it reflected from our last budget in 2009 a 95% decrease for option A and B and 22% increase for option C. With the facilities maintenance, comparing the two, the report reflected a 49% increase for options A and B and a 127% increase for option C. For transportation, when comparing the report to the 2009 expenditures, the report reflected 75% increase for all options. One of those final years, I believe that Arundel bought a bus. Is that correct, with no bond? I think I saw it was either in the 2008 or 2009 town report book. At that time, in September 2008, gas prices at the U.S. average was $3.80 a gallon. Gas prices were the same price in 2012, 2013, the same year that the last fiscal budget was passed. I don't understand how much or why there would be such a large increase in that number. Can you maybe elaborate?
Again, the basis for the estimation of costs for Arundel alone was for the initial point of departure based on the application of the 23% share of the RSU's cost applied to the RSU budget. And that is to say, the share of students that Arundel takes up of the RSU would be the same as the share of costs for each item. And that was the way that estimate was based, not on a examination and projection forward of the 2009 Arundel total when Arundel wasn't wrong.
Okay, but it would make a difference in the report?
Sure, if you substituted 2009 Arundel totals for what was listed as a 23% share of the RSU, they'd be two different numbers. Okay.
And that falls back on my original point that when I first came up here, was that those weren't taken into account when this report was put together.
They weren't the basis for the estimates in that table, correct? No, I looked at it, I examined the state subsidy numbers and budget numbers. Simply for the sake of a presentation in that table, I used the assumption, presume the cost for an Arundel student is the same as the average cost for all students in the RSU, and apply it to each of those items, and then see if that can in fact be achieved. If it's less than that, then the cost would be less. If it's more than that, the cost would be more.
Right. So, taking into consideration that the RSU is an entire district and we're just a smaller town with school choice for high school and eventually middle school, and the whole dynamics of what Arundel could do alone is entirely different than an RSU.
Yes, I think that's the point that I made here about what are known cost differences and what are variable cost differences. And clearly, administrative expense, transportation expense, and special education expenses are all ones that Arundel could get by at less than 23% of the RSU total, or may have to pay more than the 23% of the RSU total, depending upon the management that Arundel applies to its responsibilities.
Thank you. After I did some of those calculations, I went to Table 11, which includes the renovation to MLA school, as presented by the RSU. The RSU cost per thousand valuation is $12.52. The percentage increases and decreases that I just spoke about, they don't wash themselves out when doing the comparisons. Sure, we're valuing our teachers more, putting more into our school programs. What was left out of the report, at no fault of PDI, was Arundel prior to consolidation. I think there's a lot of leeway in option A, and I looked into it, and some of the shifting of some of the funding in those line items by adding more to administration, decreasing the facilities maintenance and decreasing transportation, and putting those differences into the line items of the MLA and special education. Option A, using the prior past budgets and expenditures, that option A would be a viable option.
Yes, I can see the conclusion that you reached, and that would be a starting point for a budget. If a Arundel committee was to set up a school budget, that might be a starting point.
Okay, and option A in Table 11, what was the cost per thousand? It was $11, and I don't have it in front of me, 24 cents, in comparison to the $12.54 as to what we're paying now.
Yeah, if your point is option A as presented could be a viable option by reducing transportation and special education and putting that money into administration and general instruction, and use that as a basis for saying we could operate an Arundel loan system less expensively than we could stay in the RSU, that's certainly possible.
Okay, thank you.
Jack?
Possible for sit and speak. Thank you. Good morning. My name's Jack Reeds. It seems like I've spent forever talking about school budgets. It's only been a few years. I spent several years on Arundel's budget committee. I understand the school budgets before consolidation. The last 3 years I've spent on the school board, on the budget committee, and several other committees. I'd like to present briefly a prepared presentation and then also comment on several other items that have been discussed this morning. The future of educating Arundel's children hangs in the balance. Some folks are heavily involved in urging you to withdraw from RSU 21. Many others feel remaining in RSU 21 is a far better choice. Both these groups are highly polarized. That leaves about 90% of Arundel's voters trying to decide how to vote. The recent rush of conflicting signs on our roads, yes, no, don't help either, do they? The last few months have seen an amazing sequence of events. Just last April, we all received a flyer from teen withdrawal. All seen this? Claiming that Arundel taxpayers could save over $5 million by withdrawing. They wanted the town to hire an independent consultant to make an unbiased study. I'm sure fully expecting the study to prove their point. Per state law, Arundel and RSU 21 each formed withdrawal committees to negotiate a proposed fair and equitable divorce. Arundel's withdrawal committees included not only the primary advocate for withdrawal, but was also chaired by a person who had signed the initial withdrawal petition last January. The town manager issued an RFP and planning decisions. Dr. Lawton was interviewed twice by the withdrawal committee in late May. Mr. Lawton presented a proposal that included a detailed description of the methodology he planned to use, the overall plan objectives, and a schedule. The withdrawal committee agreed and PDI was hired. Lo and behold, when the report was presented by Dr. Lawton to the public October 10th, the message was far, far different from what either the withdrawal committee or team withdrawal wanted to hear. Instead of saving taxpayers millions of dollars over a 20-year bonding period by withdrawing, the report instead said just the opposite. The report actually projected savings of many millions of dollars by remaining in RSU 21. This was a huge surprise, I'm sure, to team withdrawal. Their panic response: shoot the messenger, discredit the methodology. They very quickly concocted the pink sheet. You've all seen this in recent days. This piece of nonsense. This document is aimed solely at discrediting a highly respected economist's methodology, the very methodology they had previously reviewed and approved. Yet this same approach to developing financial planning of education cost projections has proven reliable and been used by many other Maine schools. This pink sheet is false, deliberately misleading, and factually inaccurate. It belongs in the trash can. It isn't just me who says this. Our town manager has indicated this, essentially the same thing. The official town report prepared by Dr. Lawton provides a clear and responsible comparative range of estimates for Arundel's future education costs. The conclusion was that remaining in RSU 21 will save Arundel's taxpayers many millions over the years. Most importantly, remaining will provide one of Maine's very best educations for K-5 kids at Emerald Day, excellent middle school choices at MSK and TAMS in 4 years, and continue to find high school choices, a win-win for all the parents. Withdrawal, on the other hand, will cost us millions more in tax dollars over the next 20 or so years. But withdrawal now has a far greater cost, a cost not measured in money, but in our children's lives. Can we afford to recklessly gamble with the quality of their education? I urge you to vote no on November 6th and keep our options open for the future of Arundel. Remaining in RSU 21 is a no-brainer. Thank you. Some comments, please, if I may. The previous discussions really have been picking at nits, frankly, in my view. If we look at the two key tables, Table 7 and Table 11 in this report, we see that from an operating cost standpoint in Table 7, that there are huge annual saving costs, anywhere from $400,000 to over $700,000 is projected. And you look at that over 20 years and you're talking millions. You look at Table 11, where the cost of renovation of 3 schools, 2 elementary schools, and the high school are included. And Dr. Lawton used a cost, I believe, of $53.2 million for the estimate in making that judgment. And yes, indeed, it costs a little more in renovation costs, and that reduces the savings over the 20 years. But you're bringing that number down to a couple million less, and the savings are still immense. You add $5 or $10 million to that in renovation costs, and with the projections made where Arundel's paying only 10% of that cost, and Kennebunkport are paying 90%, and that would be true of the cost of Miller Day renovation as well. It doesn't really amount to hill beans from an Arundel standpoint. The savings are still millions of dollars, and that's your choice. So, thank you.
My name is Sam Hall. My wife Joan and I live in Arundel. We moved here in 2007 and love the seacoast area, this town, and the people. Arundel is a special place, but it saddens me to see how our future is being threatened by this school issue. Not my future. I'm happily retired. No, I mean the future of our young parents and their children. Folks, I've seen this movie before. I grew up in a small town in central Massachusetts, very much like Arundel. It was and still is a mixture of farms, working families, nearby fading textile mills, and commuters. There were bad feelings and suspicions between the various sections of town. Some of the mill families from South Grafton nursed grudges against the farmers from the north. The business commuters into Worcester who lived up on the hill didn't think much of the townies down by the Blackstone River, and the feeling was mutual. I suppose every small town in New England is like this in some ways, but the town usually comes together when trouble arises. It's just wrong, I think, when actions and words driven by old stories and past history rise to the level that they seem to be at these days in Arundel. The urgency of this drive to withdraw MLD School now from its short union with our 2 neighboring towns seems to have deep roots. The original reason, as Jack said, given to us back in April was that we were going to save a lot of money. And I suppose that was enough for folks to vote to have an independent study done by Chuck and his team. At least we could figure out what the numbers for staying or going look like and what our real estate taxes might be in the future. So they were hired and they did their professional economic review. The withdrawal folks who were involved all the way through the process and knew exactly what the methodology would be. When the result was finished and issued about a month ago, I figured both sides would accept it and move on. Fair is fair, and all that. But that didn't happen. Instead, the issues we had to withdraw from the RSU shifted to other, much more fuzzy ones. The reasons for withdrawal, last chance, the sign says, by the way. I'm not sure why that is. Was suddenly changed and became local control, school choice, capital improvement program costs, and most puzzling to me, the town report is invalid. It should have been done differently. As Jack says, I guess this only proves once again that if you don't like the message, shoot the messenger. Folks, the only unbiased analysis we have is the report done by Dr. Lawton. It shows me that we have lower risk of harming the quality of education in our own elementary school, and will save millions of tax dollars, and will retain school choice in the future, and will keep local control through our representation on school building committees, the RSU school board, and ultimately our vote. I've done my research and am convinced that for all the above reasons that Arundel must remain in the RSU. I will vote no. But I have to wonder what's really behind all the expense and pain we've been put through. I don't expect an answer from the withdrawal advocates, but I urge the rest of us to look deep within our hearts and think about what's best for us as a community. Once this fight is over in a few days, we need to put our historical divisions and old stories behind us. We must find a way to reunite our town with a common vision of our future and start working together with a vigorous sense of purpose. I suggest that purpose should be truly to make Arundel a town where, as it says on our website, people matter. Not just in words, but in our everyday behavior and actions. If we don't put our history behind us soon, I fear for our future. Thank you.
Other comments? Go ahead.
My name is John Bell. I'm a 15-year resident of Arundel. Just like to take this opportunity to thank Chuck for what I think is an excellent report. I think it was very well done. I would just like to state for the record that the mistakes, so-called, in this pink sheet that went out to the whole town a day or two ago total over $1.6 million. Whether or not these mistakes were real mistakes or if they were intentional, I don't know, but I think it's outrageous that a document of this type should go out anonymously within a day or two of the election, which leaves very little time for rebuttal by anybody who knows what the real numbers are. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jake Hawkins, and thank you, sir, for the great report and starting to clarify a lot of things. However, what I'd like to address is I'd just like to ask, Diane brought it up earlier about the tests and the standing. While I agree with you philosophically, testing's not everything, but it was pointed out in a letter to the Portland Press Herald about a week and a half ago that the scores went up in MLD for some reason last year, and it was the same bunch of teachers. So my question, I just clarification purposes more than anything else, if they went up last year, was it a result of change of curricula because we joined the RSU, because we still have the same teacher teaching it? Why did they go up? Does anybody have that answer? New crop kids? I don't know.
Dr. Crowley.
Pardon?
Dr. Crowley. He coordinated the school.
Okay.
Leadership within the school.
So it's leadership. Okay, great. And the other thing I was wondering was, from my understanding, from what was, is that if we have special ed needs, which we always do, will they be shared? If we join the RSU, then they will be shared as opposed to hiring out solo guys, solo people who come in and take care of it, as opposed to if we go alone, then we're going to have to contract our own services. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Diane?
I think I need to clarify. Part of the document put in
stipulations that we would be able to coordinate our special ed with the RSU. So it's not like we have to go out and get all brand new contracted teachers. And in the RSU, we share the responsibility of special ed across the board. So I think that was one of the issues, was whether or not you had part of it or all of it, or 23% of it, and you really used 23% of it. So, no, there was, in the document, we ensured, because we had to, as part of the continuation of education, to ensure that even students that were special ed would be taken care of in the same manner that they are today.
I have a question on that, Debbie. Are these students that we're going to be contracting out to the RSU, are they going to be considered out of district placement so that we are going to be paying extra for those? Or has that been taken care of in the document?
Well, I guess it depends on what you consider to be extra. Because today, as part of the RSU, we pay a percentage of the total special education budget, regardless of what grade they're in or what school they're in. So when you have a district as big as the RSU, that budget is rather large. You never know, and that was one of the biggest things, you never know from year to year how many students you're going to have, how many of those students can be taken care of within your own school. Because there's different special ed needs. There are some special ed needs that are going to be taken care of within MLA. And then there are others that might have been in a special program that's being moved back to the RSU. So you would pay a percentage of that cost to the RSU to move that student to go there. But every year is different. So as you have a family move in, or a family move out, or 2 in, or 2 out, or 3 in and 2 out, it's, you know, as Chuck said, it's one of the things I agree with. Special education is, put it bluntly, is a crack. You don't know. You roll your dice, and you never know from year to year what you're going to get. I think even on the budget committees, and I think even Jack can agree to this, when we as the RSU board look at the budget, and the budget board looks at the budget, you never know if you're going to have enough. And you always have to put extra because you never know what's coming into the district. So I don't think that there's an easy answer for it, Belmont. The only thing that we had to try to make sure that we did was to make sure that these students wouldn't end up displaced or wouldn't end up with a program to go to. So that was our charge, to make sure that they still had a program and they had a place to go to get that special education if they had to go outside of MLA.
Okay, so those costs are included in the withdrawal document, so that we wouldn't end up, we're only going to end up paying actual costs for those students and their instructors. Because I understand we're going to be losing 3 or 4 A's that are going to the students. We wouldn't be, those students would be considered out of the district, which cost a lot more.
Yep. You get 100% of the special ed.
Yes. It doesn't specify in the document what that rate is. It's not specified.
Yeah, so that would be negotiated.
The RSU
have to
would give us
negotiate.
the option to negotiate contract or the contract
Because you don't know. You don't know what level they're going to need. That's the problem.
When does we pay 100%?
100% of whatever they need. It's just like paying for Lawton and paying for this.
Any other comments? No more questions? Everyone has their questions.
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
I'm Ryan Ball. I have 2 young children. So
You can't hear.
Sorry. So my name is Ryan Bollock. I have 2 young kids in Arundel. And just a question about the withdrawal. If we withdraw, then obviously we lose, like, say, Dr. Crowley. Then he's part of the RSU, or is he no longer employed under MLD?
Dr. Crowley has a contract that says that if we withdraw, he has the option of going back to the RSU, so it would be his choice.
Okay.
It would depend on, I would imagine, whether or not we could afford his cost.
Okay, is his cost a lot higher than the previous?
Oh, yes.
Okay, all right. I'm just kind of giving you all this stuff. And also, if we stay, is it imminent that the buyout of the TAMs happens? It's not.
No, I think that is a subject that was when that was turned down, that was completely dropped. They will stay with the TAM's contract, I understand, until it expires. When it expires, our junior high kids will then have a choice of going to either Kingdom Middle School or to TAM's.
Okay, and then someone stated previously, even if we do stay, we will still have a high school choice through 2023.
Always.
Always. Okay.
That will stay until such time as the taxpayers in the town of Arundel actually go to a town meeting and vote to not have choice. So that's the only, I think that is the only way that we could not have choice. If the taxpayers, if the taxpayers in this town and
the state allows us to have school choice because we do not have a high school, so until such time as we would build a high school, there would be high school.
But they would have to go to town meeting.
yes, they would have to go to town meeting. Everything would have to go to town meeting.
Okay. I had one more.
Yes, go ahead.
Do you remember it? Okay, I just heard also about the basically school improvement bond issues. Arundel, as part of the RSU, we have to pay, is this a fixed 10% of the total? 14.67? Okay.
Unless the cost sharing gets voted, is voted to be changed.
Okay. And that's of all the capital improvements, or?
Yes. And of course, those capital improvement costs, we're still having meetings on those, and the meetings are public, people can go to the meetings and voice their concerns. That will also come down to a vote. Whatever is finally decided by those committees, and that number that's finally put together will come down to a vote.
Bill, if I might, Diane, could you please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the renovation would require a 2/3 majority vote of the entire RSU.
Correct.
You would have to be a 2/3 majority in order for those renovations, whatever number they bring to the voters, 2/3 have to vote in favor in order to.
Is that for each project, or is that?
It would be done as a lump sum, I assume.
Okay, so that's, we're going to do all these schools at once. You approve it now.
That's how they. That's the.
Or how they're proposing.
Separate articles or?
Okay. That's, thank you.
Jack, am I wrong? Is that around 2/3?
If I may,
I'd like to make I think, a correction there. First of all, at the 60/40 current cost sharing arrangement, Arundel pays approximately 15% of any new debt, 14.5%, 15 for round numbers. If we vote to change the cost sharing formula per the three-town committee agreement to 100-0, that cost reduces to about 9.5%, 10% around, 15% down to 10%. The 2/3 majority is required for the cost sharing change by the whole district. The new debt, however, that would be voted on subsequent to that would be a simple majority. That's simply debt. Anybody disagree?
I don't know. Clarification.
press about the high school being increased to 53 million, 54 million, or something like that. A large part of that is due, however, to some discussions going on with a private group about funding a performing arts center on the school ground. They would fund it. If they did, and passes and all that happens, that's totally outside the scope of any data. We would not be responsible for any of that. That's still in the talking phase, however, it may or may not happen.
I think a lot of the planning is still in the talking stage, because if you read in the paper, Port has come back and said they would like more improvements done to their school. So the committee is now looking at those options. Arundel would have the same choice. We could go back to the committee and say, we don't like what you planned for our kitchen, so therefore we want, Port's going to get a new kitchen, we want a brand new kitchen, and if any of you have seen this kitchen, you know what it is, and you know. So we have that same option of going back to the committee and saying, okay, this is what you planned. We have a committee working on this building right now. And we could go back to that committee and say, all right, this is what you planned, but we would like to go even further. It doesn't matter what the numbers are when they finally come up. It is going to go to public hearings. And the public hearings are normally held in the high school, in the gym, because you need room. Everybody here has the right to stand up and voice their opinions. And the committee does listen to those opinions, because when it finally goes to a vote, it's going to be up to every person in the district to decide yes or no. And I think, as some of you know, if the town of Arundel's taxpayers decide that they don't like this plan, we voted down a budget before, and enough of us come out, we actually can outvote Port. We've done it before, and that's an option we can do again. But you will have your say. So, as far as I'm concerned, the only local control we have is your vote. Because even if we're on our own, your local control is controlled by the state of Maine. And the state of Maine will tell you what you're going to do, whether or not you're on your own. But at least if you're in the RSU, the state of Maine is trying to tell a lot more people in a much larger group what they're going to do.
One more time, if I may. I sat on the high school building committee. I currently am a member of that committee, although a non-voting board member. I'm currently on the facilities committee as well, and I've sat in on the meetings of the subcommittees for Consolidated and for Mildred Day. I'm participating in every one of those meetings. And Mrs. Hayes is absolutely right. We can change. Right now, the Mildred Day Committee had pretty much settled on a number. And this data is being consolidated by the architect, who's coming up with cost estimates within the next couple of weeks here. I think the next Facilities Committee meeting is the 9th of November, if I'm not mistaken. At any rate, go to the RSU 21 website, rsu21.net, and all the meeting schedules are there. There's also a high school building committee, and all of this is still in flux. We're at the conceptual design stage right now. And initial cost estimates by the architect's cost estimate expert are being made, and but it's still very much in a state of flux. And the last meeting we had, we sent the architect back and told him that the cost was too high. You've got to work on it. But we're still at the conceptual stage, and there is participation by people in Arundel on these committees, and we really do have a voice. But you've got to jump in there and participate to make it happen. Thank you.
Jack, before you sit down,
yes,
please. give the audience an idea of how many different plans they have looked at the high school renovation, so they get an idea of the scope of what it takes to come up with a decision?
Well, we've been through, Dana, perhaps 12 to 15 initial plans. Right now, as it got boiled down, there are 8 different schematic, 8 different plans, variations of plans, and 2 major scenarios, one with a performing arts center, one without. And of course, the costs are definitely different. But one has private funding and one does not. There are 8, and we have them all costed. The data's all available. But it's preliminary, it's conceptual at this point. We've been through just a huge number of iterations in the last, 2 years now? Any other questions? Okay.
We did want to wrap the meeting up by 12 o'clock. There are no other questions, no other comments. Anyone on the board? Any questions or comments from the board? Then I will adjourn the meeting, and please, not only go vote on Tuesday, but the Arundel Historical Society is having their food sale on Tuesday. And